So, welcome to the podcast, people. On the podcast, one of my wrestling heroes, a great wrestling legend, Al Snow. Hey, man, what's going on, dude?
I'm very excited to be on your podcast. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. You're welcome. Thank you for joining. So, before you were Al Snow and before you were any of the other wrestlers, you were Al Sarvin, which was born in Lima, Ohio.
That is true. I was born in Lima, Ohio, 1963. But I've been Al Snow probably all my life and just didn't realize it until I got into the wrestling business.
What was it like living in Ohio? Because was there a lot of wrestling in your family? Like, did your family like wrestling, or did you just see upon it on TV and it's like, oh man, that's what I want to do?
I was a wrestling fan from when I was a small child. Ohio has always been a very strong wrestling territory. When I grew up during the late 60s and into the 70s, probably till about 74, that territory was owned by Ed Farhat, who was the original Sheik. He controlled all of Michigan, Ohio, part of western Pennsylvania, a little bit of that, a little bit of northwestern West Virginia. He would slide into northern Kentucky a little bit on shows. And Ohio was always a very strong money territory because as opposed to a lot of other states, both Ohio and Michigan were prime areas because, one, they had a very strong population center. Two, in Ohio, for instance, you had major cities that were all within a 2-hour drive of each other. So you had Toledo, then you could go an hour south of Toledo to Lima, which was where I grew up, and that was more like a spot show town. But even in a spot show town, you'd still, population-wise, you could draw about 2,000 people or more. Another hour south was another major city, which was Dayton, Ohio. And then another hour and a half south of that was Cincinnati, which is a major population center. Then you go an hour and a half east from there, and you were in Columbus. Then you were to go an hour and a half north from Columbus, and you're in Cleveland. Then you go another hour and a half from there to Canton, and then another hour and a half from there to Akron, which were all major population centers and had, large arenas. So, it was a great territory. And then in wrestling history, it was one of the more prominent ones.
So, take me back to when you first started training for wrestling.
When I first started training for wrestling, it wasn't like it is now. It wasn't a proliferation of schools or quote-unquote trainers. The reason it wasn't, aside from the fact that it was very closed, very secular business, it was very difficult to get in. And the reason why it was very difficult is because there was a code, very strictly enforced code. Mm-hmm. And that was that whoever you trained, you were held directly responsible for. Mm-hmm. Period. So if the person you trained sucked or did anything that adversely affected business, it adversely affected the way that you made a living. Mm-hmm. It hurt your reputation. In a lot of instances, you could be very well blackballed from the wrestling business, depending on how bad the person screwed up. So people were not very reticent to train people. And, most of the wrestlers, unless they were a promoter, didn't have a ring, mm-hmm. didn't have a location a lot of times, and quite honestly, they didn't need one, because you were taught primarily how to wrestle, and then you were taught how to work a wrestling match. Mm-hmm. Conversely now, you're taught, really, in most places, how to land properly. Then you're taught how to hit the ropes immediately. And then you're taught, how to do moves and counters off of running the ropes before before you really even understand or know the concept of trying to work a wrestling match.
Right.
And what I mean by work a wrestling match is, that term gets misused these days. To work a wrestling match is not to perform a wrestling match. To work a wrestling match is to work with your opponent to convince the audience of a lie. The lie, the only lie in professional wrestling, is that we know who's going to win that match. So we're trying to tell a story within a competitive situation, with trying to create gravity or consequence to the win and the loss, so that it creates drama and an emotional response. And that's how you work an audience. You don't just go out and perform wrestling moves or wrestling that in a wrestling match. You go out and you try to convince people that are watching that they're actually watching a real sporting event, that they're really watching a contested wrestling match.
Right. I want to bounce around a little bit. I don't want to stick with just a certain thing of how I do it. So when I booked you on the show, I went back and watched a bunch of your matches just to get a refresher, just to do this. And one of my favorite matches that I didn't really forget about, but it was kind of like after the actual Al Snow thing happened, it was just like, oh, this was put as an underrated match in my opinion, was when in 95 when you wrestled Chris Benoit in that 15-minute match. I mean, because that was held really as one of the match of the year in 95.
Yeah, at that time, I mean, everybody really enjoyed it, and Chris and I had a chemistry that I always enjoyed working with him, because we had a very like-minded approach, and we tried to, we had the same belief that it's not about just performing a wrestling match; it was about convincing the audience that they were really watching a competitive situation. So
who were some of the most people that you worked with that you had great chemistry with? Was there like a couple that just came to your mind, or was it just you had to have chemistry in order to have a match?
Well, you don't have to have chemistry to have a match. I mean, you can have,
right.
You can have guys that you can either lead or you're being led, but there are those guys that, like we call the term, is called a night off, where it just, things are so easy, and it's so effortless when you're in there. It feels like it's a night off. And working with Benoit was always that way. Working with Sabu, Chris Gambito, Brad Armstrong was like that. But Brad, though, sometimes like that night, one night we'd be like, it'd be effortless, and then the next night it's like we couldn't get click, or it just didn't feel the same. And then the next night would be great, and then the next night would be, Sam Hughes. God, what an underrated guy that was. He was just so easy, so good. George South, so underrated. People don't appreciate just how talented he is, and, how good he is, and we just worked in the recent past, and God, it was so, we had the people doing exactly what we wanted, and we were in there literally making each other laugh while we're doing it. So that's how easy and effortless it is with certain people.
Right.
You can literally be, nobody in the building would know it, but the build you, but you're in there just cutting up and having a good time. Ricky Morton too, Ricky and Robert, just so professional, just so they have an understanding, a feel that you just can't teach. It's got to be learned, and the reason that they know it is because they were taught initially what it was that they were supposed to be out there trying to do. So.
And I think that's a great thing, because that shows how well of an entertainer and a performer and actual athletic that you guys are. Because sure, like you said, no one's going to notice if, let's say, John Doe gets in the ring with you, Al Snow. You're not going to realize that John Doe, this might be his second or third match, because he's in with someone that's had more experience than a person being green, And I think that's kind of what the wrestling business is all about, making the other person look good.
The wrestling business is not about that. The wrestling business is about knowing how to hide your own strengths and accentuating your weakness, accentuating your strengths and hiding your weaknesses, and then doing that with your opponent, so that you can. Because if you beat nothing, you are nothing. So you can make your opponent look any number of ways, and for you to look the best, your opponent has to look like they were competitive and they were at least a challenge that you overcame.
Right. So going back to 1982, this was your debut match. What were you nervous at all, or were you more, because I've interviewed like Alex Riley from WWE and stuff like that, and like he was not as nervous as most people would. He was more excited. So what would you say you were? Were you nervous to have your first match, or were you more excited?
I would say that it's both.
Okay.
A lot of people mistake excitement for nerves. And they mistake excitement for anxiety. When really, quite honestly, like, still to this day, right before I walk through the curtain, I got to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And if ever a day comes to where I don't have that feeling, like if I don't I'm not going to walk through the curtain, I'm not partially dreading it and at the same time excited to go out, then I'll quit. Because that means I just don't care anymore.
Right, and I've heard a lot of people say that, especially musicians, where they were like, if I'm ever not nervous to the point where I have to walk on stage, then this is not meant for me anymore. I've heard a lot of people say that.
Time to quit. Time to quit.
Right.
So you're taking the edge away. It's and you're no longer are you passionate about it. If you have any real passion, you have any real desire, you're going to have that anxiety. You're going to have that mixture of anxiety and excitement, that mixture of dread and anticipation, all at the same time. You're going to have that. If you don't, that means you just don't give a shit. You don't care anymore. So
right.
Time to wrap it up.
Right. So tell me about this guy 11 years later named Steve Moore that was a jobber in the WWF and lost to like Marty Jannetty and Undertaker and people like that.
It was just a TV spot that, was booking, and I used the name Steve Moore because I didn't want to use the name Al Snow. So, and that was it. It was short-lived. And it was at a time where I was getting frustrated because I was wasn't getting booked often enough or working enough to my liking, because when I had initially started out, I was working very frequently, and then because of the territory starting to die, things started drying up and slowing down, and I thought, you know what, if I could get on with WWF at the time, and just even if it was just to work as an enhancement talent, then so be it. I was like, I don't care, but I'm not going to use my real name. I'll just use another ring name, and and that was it. And then it just never went anywhere. And I went up and did we did those 3 days of TV tapings, and then it never went anywhere, which was obviously was not meant to be. Because then I went to Smoky Mountain in '95, and then from there I went to WWF.
Right. So, what would you say? How did the name Al Snow come about? Was that your idea, or was it someone else's idea? Because I didn't. Go ahead.
I had a childhood friend that was African American, and I spent a lot of time hanging out with him in that neighborhood, and I was the only white kid there, so a lot of people called me, Snow White, Snowball, Snowman, and then my name is Al, so I just was like, you know what, I just call myself Al Snow.
And because I've heard stories of like maybe wrestling companies that are like, well, these names don't work. So did anyone tell you that Al Snow wouldn't work as a wrestling name or a gimmick name?
No.
No. So in '95, this is when you had a debut match against Taz at ECW. From '93 being a jobber in WWF to go into '95 at ECW, was that stressful, or was it anxious, or what was going through your mind when you debuted at ECW?
Nothing. It's just another wrestling match. The same goes for when I worked in WWF in '93. Those were just wrestling matches. That's all they are. I mean, that's, you know, you don't put a, you know, to me, because people ask me all the time, what was your favorite match? What's this or that? I can't answer that question because every time I go out there, it's, you know, I love doing what I love to do so much that, you know, it's, you know, and I guess, like, at the time I didn't appreciate the significance of, like, working on WrestleMania. But to me, working on WrestleMania was no different than if I worked any other show. I'm just as excited to go out and perform and do what I love to do, you know. Mm-hmm. And that was what mattered to me, and still does. And there could be 6 people in the audience or 66,000 people in the audience. Right. I'm not going to do anything different or anything less. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm turning it up because there's 66,000 people out there, or I'm going to, you know, back it off and just coast. Excuse me. Because there's only 6. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure. And I'm being quite sincere. I mean, this will sound hokey and it'll sound disingenuous, but it's the truth. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do everything I can to try to make sure that those people leave feeling like they got their money's worth. I feel that, you know, and this is the advice I give people when I train them, you know, or young guys come up, hey, what piece of advice can you give me? I try to invest time, money, and effort in myself, and always have, because I know that audience invested their time, money, and effort to come see me. So I'm going to try to do everything I can to make sure that when they leave, they feel like they spent their money the right way. You know, even if it was just for my match, I don't care. All I care about is making sure that people got what they paid for. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes maybe not so much, but I'm always out there trying to work that crowd, tell them some kind of a story, and elicit that emotional climax at the end. And, you know, there's you know, and that's the thing I love to do. And, you know, having a match with Taz for the first time in ECW is no different to me than having a match, you know, at any other show, at any other arena, you know, at any other time, than having a match at WrestleMania or, you know, headlining an ECW pay-per-view a couple years later. You know, my mindset is always still the same. Go out there and, you know, do the best that you can with the spot that you have and tell a story and, you know, make these people believe. Even if it's just for the time that they're in that building. Mm-hmm. I want them even if it's just a second to go, you know what, I know this stuff's not real, but these guys look like they're really trying to win. Like they're really trying to beat each other. That's my goal. Mm-hmm. Always has been.
So, tell me about OVW. What it is now, because you're an owner of OVW now.
OVW is fantastic. I've always loved OVW. I came down here in the early 2000s as head trainer for WWE. When Danny Davis owned it, we had an awesome time. I got a lot of talent that was non-contract talent hired and started their careers while I was here. Taught a lot of, you know, major superstars that now have been either on the main roster or have made it at WrestleMania. And it brought me back. I was back a second time, you know, and helped create the developmental program for TNA in coordination with OVW. And we did the same thing then. And so I bought OVW June of 2018 from Danny, and since that time I've been rebuilding it. working with the talent here. We now, we've done several. Once I bought it, we had our 1,000th consecutive television episode in October of that year. We did a live television event for the very first time ever in the history of the company to celebrate that. And since then, we've done several live television events. And then, as of the beginning of this month, we go live. We've been live every week. We do a weekly television show live on Tuesday nights because I wanted to provide the talent the experience of performing on a live television show prior to if they ever have an opportunity with one of the bigger companies, say WWE or AEW now. That's not the place that you want to have your very first experience of being on a live television show. You want to know what you're doing as much as you can before you ever get to that place. Because that one opportunity, it can make or break you. And if you don't know how best to perform and utilize that live television event, it more than likely is going to break you. So between going live every week to create that experience for the talent, we've also taken steps to help with their health and safety. We have a neurologist who we can consult with if anybody gets an injury, like a head injury. We have a podiatrist. We have an orthopedic surgeon. We have a strength and conditioning coach. We have an athletic trainer that's at every television show that works with the athletes, evaluating them and keeping them in good condition. We also went. It took us about a year to accomplish it, but we, as a training center, are the first in the world to be an actually state-accredited training center for both sports entertainment and broadcasting. So we have a 2-year program that students can apply for and enroll in the school. And when they finish their 2-year program, they'll be both certified professional wrestlers, which is an unheard of term because nobody's ever had it before, and a certified personal trainer. So they get both. They get instruction in both. But they don't just learn how to perform in the ring. They learn how to operate cameras, lighting, sound, how to direct, how to edit. They learn the history and the etiquette of the wrestling business, photography, how to host a television show. And we have instructors that all have a wealth of experience, both with inside the wrestling ring and then, within broadcasting. We've got former television hosts. We have a news anchor. We've got who teach these kids skills, not just within the ring, but outside the ring as well, so that when and if the day comes, they can no longer physically perform in the ring, they now have skills that they can pursue another career.
Right. Being the owner of OVW and now having like a being on TV, what has been the hardest part of that process?
The hardest part of that process is just really keeping up with everything.
Okay.
That is probably it's one thing to promote a wrestling show.
Right.
It's another to have an ongoing concern, doing a weekly television show, promoting those weekly television events, in addition to promoting some type of weekly live event schedule. So you have to continuously, and it never stops, you've got to continuously stay ahead and continuously be promoting the next event every single week. Not just your television events that you have to draw an audience for, but all of the other events in the surrounding area. You've got to promote all of those and try to create an interest in an audience for those as well, in addition to running the school, administrating all of the duties that go along with taking care of the school and the training and making sure that everything's properly followed and adhered to. You've got to keep up with the wrestling commission and all the regulations with that, for your talent. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of things you have to do.
Yeah.
So, it's a monster. It really is.
So, I asked this wholeheartedly. What is Jim Cornette like? Because I remember when you Smoky Mountain Wrestling, you recorded by him. What is he? Because a lot of people say he's just an old school wrestling guy. So what is he like personally?
First off, I'll tell you this, okay? And this is God's honest truth. There is no old school.
Okay.
Okay. If you can think of a way that you guys who believe there's a new school, tell me how you've reinvented the wheel. Right. Tell me how it's no longer round, how it's now octagonal or hexagonal.
Right. Tell
me what you're selling now that's different than, say, what Jimmy was selling in 1972.
Right.
We have never sold anything different. Now, how we go about doing that has evolved, has changed, has become more sophisticated. Absolutely. But that's only because the audience has evolved and become more sophisticated.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Okay? We are always and have always been a reflection of our audience. More simplistic approaches were used in more simplistic times. Now, more advanced techniques have to be used because you have a more advanced audience. So, Cornette he's a school guy, not an old or new. And he is incredible. I love Jimmy. He is an amazing person. And I owe him, so much. But he, when you break it down and you actually listen to Jimmy, Jimmy is very honest and very direct. And, and his critiques aren't wrong. I mean, he, in regards to business purposes and practices, and the ultimately what you're trying to do, which is help to convince the audience that they're watching a competitive circumstance, that's all he's trying to emphasize.
Right.
And, he's if more people would actually truly listen to him, not just hear him.
Sure.
But truly listen to him, it should help tremendously. The problem for Jimmy is that he's so passionate about it that his passion sometimes overrules his his approach. And so his approach sometimes will turn people off to where they shut down when they don't listen to him, they only hear him.
Right.
That would be the only, that his approach and his passion distracts from his message sometimes.
No.
But it helps create an audience for him, too,
right.
At the same time.
Right. No, I agree 100% with what you're saying about how it has to evolve. And I use this analogy a lot, like in music. Like for me, I grew up on country music. So when people say that's not country anymore, I look at it as if, well, Johnny Cash wasn't considered country. You know what I mean? And now that you look back, all these guys are this kind of type of music now. But it doesn't sound, it doesn't look like it did in the 90s or the 80s. But that's because people are evolving. Now, it might make a big circle and come back around, in 10 years. But as of right now, it has to evolve with the time, because if not, it's easily going to die out.
Correct. But you always have to adhere to what it is you are actually selling.
Right.
And that's the problem today, is that too many of the wrestling performers truly believe that the wrestling business has actually changed, meaning, i.e., that we are no longer selling the outcome or the finish because, hey, they all know it's fake. Well, I got news for you. They've always known it's fake.
Yeah, right.
Okay? That's nothing new. Okay? But now they believe that what they're selling is what they do, not why they do it. And if that's the case, I always ask these 4 questions. And then, and I've yet to be able to get somebody to give me a logical answer. But if you get a logical answer for it, I'll agree with you that things have changed. We're no longer selling the outcome, we're selling what we do. Question one is, if what you say is true, that the audience doesn't care anymore about the win loss, or if there's no good guy, there's no bad guy anymore. Okay. Then why is it that do I pay commentators, a ring announcer, everybody to make it seem like we were watching a sporting event?
Yeah.
80% of the show that I do is all built around trying to create an atmosphere that if you're watching a competitive sporting event. Why am I wasting that money?
Sure.
If what you say is true, why would I even have those people out there? I'll just have you go to the ring.
Yeah.
Two, if what you say is true, why don't pay a referee? The referee's useless. One, he's useless because you totally ignore him. You don't treat him as if he has any real authority. And nobody in the ring does anything to violate any rules anymore, because there aren't really any. Because what matters is what you do, not why you did it. So why am I paying that referee? Three, if what you say is true, why am I paying for championship belts for you to win?
Right.
They don't mean anything, because your win and loss doesn't mean anything. Because the audience doesn't care about your win and loss. All they care about is your cool moves. So why am I paying for these belts that you need to work your way up a ladder to achieve? And what does it mean when you get it? Because what's at stake if you're not really selling the outcome anyways?
Right.
And four, the most important question, is if what you say is true. The audience doesn't care about that win and loss. They know it's bullshit.
Yeah.
They don't want to come in. They're not coming to the show to believe that. They just want to see cool stuff. Okay. Then why do you get upset when I ask you to lose?
Yeah.
If it don't mean anything to the audience, why does it mean something to you? How am I burying you by beating you if you don't think the win and loss mean anything, and you're performing as if the win and loss don't mean anything? So why do you get upset when I ask you to lose?
Right.
Doesn't make any sense.
I'm so passionate about wrestling that I don't know the in and outs of it like a lot of people do. Like, I'm not a wrestling historian. I watch it as a fan, and from what I've researched.
Pretty simple.
But for me, when people say fake, I get really offended because I say, okay, I'm look at them and I go, it's not, sure, it could be called fake wrestling, but I prefer the term predetermined. So you're saying if Jimmy goes out there and actually breaks his leg, somehow they made that look fake. Sure, there are times where for the storyline they have to get injured, but if something really does happen, how is that considered fake? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's a misnomer, and it's a misunderstanding by people that have never actually physically been in the ring, because quite honestly, there's nothing physically that happens in the ring that's fake. It's the only thing that's not real is just the intent behind it, which is what those ultimately you're trying to sell or convince the audience of, which is that you're trying to use what you're doing to try to win. And if you were to do a storyline where you were to break somebody's leg, it's because you broke the guy's leg because to one of your matches that you could possibly not win. So you're trying to eliminate that threat before the person gets in the ring. Again, it's the why. It's not the what you did. It's always the why.
Yeah.
That's what sells. So
you've mentioned AEW a couple of times. What are your thoughts on AEW? Because this is at the time we're recording.
I hope to goodness that they succeed and not only survive but thrive. I'm very personally proud of Cody Rhodes. I broke Cody into the wrestling business and training in OVW from the ground up. And I'm very proud of what he's done and what he's accomplished and, where he's going. And, all ships rise with the tide. So the more successful AEW can be, the more it will push WWE, which will make it's nothing but good, nothing but positive for the fans, nothing but good and positive for the wrestlers, nothing but good and positive for the wrestling business to have all of this going on right now and have all this interest. So, I just hope it continues and not only survives but thrives. I really do.
Yeah, you and me both. So just real quick, I don't want to cover all these things. I just want to go over your resume real quick. So, and then we'll talk about where Al Snow actually happened. So in '95, you worked for WWF. You debuted as a Power Ranger type wrestler, and then in '96, you wrestled as Shinobi, which was a ninja hired by Cornette to kill Shawn Michaels. And then '97, you wound back in ECW, and this is the time frame where the Al Snow effect happened.
Really, all it is, for a long time, until 95, when I went to Smoky Mountain, and even I didn't realize it at the time, it was the fact that, I was, everybody called me the best kept secret in wrestling, and that I was a great in-ring performer. The problem was, though, I didn't have a definable personality. Didn't have a definable character. And the very most important thing that a wrestler has to have is a definable character. You have to be able to describe to your friends and family, you got to watch the show, there's this guy and he's A, B, C, D, E. If they don't have that, and the most successful wrestlers have always had that definable character, that definable personality, that not only can they describe, but that clicks emotionally, because the reason it clicks emotionally is because it's really who the person is. That's why it works. It's not a character. It really, and people have said this before, it's an aspect of their personality that you just turn the brain way up and let loose. And it worked when I was in Smoky Mountain, because I was a smart-ass heel and running my mouth, and you felt like you wanted to beat me up and felt like you could. And then, when I went back to ECW, because I floundered a lot in WWF at the time, because they didn't know who I was, and I didn't have a definable personality or character. And I was trying to find one and create one myself. And then I went to ECW and created that personality, that persona. And it worked, and that was why it worked, was because it was whoever it was. So, and it connected. So that having that definable personality is of the utmost importance.
When was it that you realized? Because as I look back now, I didn't realize how over and how big you were at the time until I actually looked back. So when was it for you that you realized, oh, this character is actually selling tickets and they're coming to see me? When did you realize that it was over? Your character was over?
That's hard to say. At the time, because you're so deep in the forest, you're standing right next to a tree, so you can't see the rest of the woods. It's tough. That's a mistake on my part, because again, I just so enjoyed getting in the ring and doing what I did that I wasn't paying attention to or cared enough to be, I just wanted to be used better and used on a regular basis. And that was the whole thing. And then, I should have paid attention to and capitalized on literally what I had more. And, you learn through the experience. So.
Mm-hmm. So, last couple of questions here as we're going on about 40 minutes here. I want to be very courteous of your time.
I got to hop off.
Yeah. So, you have a new book, which is called Self-Help. Real quick, tell me what that book is about. Is it an autobiography or what? Tell the people that don't know.
It's an autobiography about my life and career. I tried to keep it light, keep it entertaining, keep it funny, and at all times be absolutely, completely honest. Admit all my mistakes, take responsibility for my part in a lot of things that happened throughout my career, and and the lessons that I learned along the way. It's tried to make it a fun and entertaining book, and at the same time a little informative too, and and just impart some of the life lessons I picked up in wrestling.
So you have a podcast, which is Inside Al Snow's Head. I like that play on words, because you used head as the mannequin head that you used, but you also used it like inside of your actual head. So what is the podcast about for those that don't know?
It's about everything, but mostly about wrestling, and it's just, same thing as what we're doing here, just my opinions and my, views, and and my explanations as to why I have them, and we try to have fun and enjoy it, and make jokes and people laugh and have a good time.
So, man, I took 40 minutes every time. I'm really gracious. So go ahead and plug and tell everybody what you got going on in your life.
Okay, you can follow me at The Real Al Snow on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. That's The Real Al Snow, because there were some fakes, and I would message them and go, look, guys, if I was going to fake being a celebrity, I would put the bar higher. I got a little blue check mark, or whatever you want to call it. I'm verified on all of them. And you can also follow OVW at, you can go to ovwrestling.com. You can get more information on OVW. We do have our own streaming network, which is the OVW Wrestling Network, because we have a library over 1,000 episodes of television. We're producing live television every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock on WBNA Channel 21. It's an actual broadcast television show. It's not just done on the internet. You can look us up on YouTube. You can see the latest episodes on YouTube. You can also go, and if you want more information on the school, you can go to aswa.live. It's the Al Snow Wrestling Academy of Sports Entertainment and Broadcasting. And you can go to aswa.live, and you can get more information there. Because we're an actual accredited trade school, where you can get grants, you can get loans, you can use scholarships, you can use any type of financial aid to attend the 2-year course. And it gives you skills all the way around. We do live events all the time, and all over the state and all over the region. And we're not just a school, we're an operational territory. And if you look up OVW, you'll find that we have a very, very, very impressive, extensive list of alumni that have been with WWF, WWE, or other major wrestling organizations.
This podcast is brought to you by Hodgepodge Productions.